Good evening, everyone, and a warm welcome to all the participants and our speaker of today, architect Sunanda Satwa. Before we start, let me request all the participants, we will be keeping you on mute. Please keep your audio on mute in the benefit for getting the best quality of webinar. Also, your video can be off now. You can put all of this on during the question answer section. And it will also be nice if you all display your names for the purpose of the certificate, as well as we will know who is saying what. Good evening and warm welcome. Those of you who are new, I know many people already are familiar with our group and me. But for those who are new, I am Dr. Roshni Yehuda. I'm president of the Institute of Environmental Architecture and Research, which is a Mumbai-based educational research and training institute with a vision to create a sustainable environment through scientific research, education and training, socio-cultural understanding, community engagement and awareness. We are a multidisciplinary group comprising of architects, planners, ecologists, engineers, botanists, microbiologists, lawyers, and we are all academicians. We have come together to form this organization after working collaboratively for nearly more than 15 years. Our mission in this institute is Environment First, and we started this webinar series after the lockdown was imposed in March, and we started it around April as a way of sharing knowledge with our experts from our experts and the practitioners in the field, but also to learn through interaction, questions and discussions that we take from you. So it's also an interaction that helps us. Today is our first talk in our research series. So far, we've had panel discussions on various subjects, including humans in the natural world, as well as indoor and air quality with respect to the COVID-19 pandemic. And soon our next webinar will be held next Saturday, 25th of July, where we'll have a very eminent architect and urban planner, Sulakshana Mahajan, who will be talking about environmental psychology with respect to the COVID-19 pandemic, a very important subject. Coming back to our series here today on research, this is our first series, and we will be having at least one every month from now on. Research is an integral part of our institute. We have been involved in the past in several research projects in the areas of indoor environment quality, sustainable building materials, and energy efficiency. And also our team comprising of all the faculty members at Rachna Sansad earlier, has guided more than 250 postgraduate students in various areas related to environmental architecture. So this research series that we are going to have every month will feature one of the researches that has been done. The objective being for people to understand the rigors of research, what is the motivation behind research, and what does the researcher think about the research after many years of completing it or after completing it, whatever. Today, our speaker is architect Sunanda Satwa. I'm very pleased to present to you today, and also very proud because she's been part of our institute as a student. The topic that she's going to talk about, I think, is a very, very interesting topic. It's called biomimicking trees, water transportation in buildings. Biomimicry, I think, as a subject is of interest today in every field of design. To be able to, or to try to mimic nature, to learn from nature and create products, technologies that can be of use to mankind. That is the overall understanding of biomimicry. And from wind turbines inspired by humpback whales to inventions in life-saving surgical devices to elegant aircrafts to the bullet train, all are sort of some examples of biomimicry, how we have learned from nature and how we have applied our knowledge from nature. There are many things available for study in nature, but one subject is truly bewildering. And here I will quote from Peter Ward's book called The Forest, in which there's a one whole chapter on this subject. He says, if someone were to announce that he had invented a machine that was run by energy from the sun, manufactured food out of water and carbon dioxide, and was powerful enough to split rock, was not only functional but also extremely beautiful, available in thousands of models, many of which changed colors throughout the year, then people would no doubt travel thousands of miles to gaze upon so wondrous a fabrication. Yet, this remarkable mechanism, a tree, any tree, is available for inspection as a common feature of our landscape. So yes, that is the subject that Sunanda had chosen for her research. And here I am presenting to you Sunanda. Before I introduce Sunanda, I want to just say that I have known her for many years since she enrolled into the master's program, but as a very self-motivated and very passionate person, in whatever she takes up, she has shown these abilities. She's an architect, educator, and writer. She has been designing hospitals, prisons, educational institutions, and commercial interiors for over 18 years. In 2015, she left Kamal Malik and Associates to pursue her master's in environmental architecture at the Rachna Sansad's Institute of Environmental Architecture. Since then, she's also been working on green architecture. Sunanda is currently an associate professor at CTES College of Architecture and has been teaching B-Arch and M-Arch courses since the past 5 years. She is an IGBC accredited professional, a GRIHA certified professional and evaluator. She deals with a varied range of projects under her consultancy firm called Sun Arcs. Sunanda is an avid reader, writer, and researcher with over 60 articles and academic papers published in various national and international journals. I present to you Sunanda Satwa. Sunanda, it's all over to you now.
Thank you, Dr. Roshni, for that wonderful introduction. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. You can slightly maybe raise your voice.
Okay. Yeah, because over here I'm getting the message that my network bandwidth is a little low. So I was checking that. Okay. So let's hope the internet supports us in this presentation. So welcome to everyone over here once again. And thank you, Dr. Roshni, for that wonderful introduction. It's an honor to be able to present my master's dissertation that I actually did under Dr. Shashidhar Kashyap and yourself, Dr. Roshni Udayavar Yehuda. And it's an honor to be presenting it over here in front of everyone else. And earlier when I was discussing with Dr. Roshni, she said that I can modify it in a format, present it in a format where I'll be, of course, presenting the dissertation, but also emphasizing upon what the process was, the research itself, and what the journey has been at that time and since. So without much further ado, I'll share my presentation. And while I do that, I'll also be sharing snippets of what my learnings were. Another thing that I'd like to also mention on the onset is that I haven't presented is the subject. I have tried to put it in a manner where it's more like a narrative and a process and how I went about the whole thing, so it's more engaging and interesting. So just give me a minute while I share the presentation. Is the screen visible?
Yes.
Okay. So as in the introductions being mentioned, it was a research dissertation, biomimicking trees, water transportation in buildings. And this was conducted under the guidance of Dr. Shashidhar Kashyap and Roshni Udayavar Yehuda. I would like to start with this quote because the inspiration is trees. These are the first two lines of a poem, like, on trees by Joyce Kilmer, where he says, "I think that I shall never see a poem lovely as a tree." Now, under this topic, what we'll essentially be looking at in this presentation, for the sake of time, is we'll be looking at biomimicry, trees, water transportations, briefly on pumps, and what a biomimetic design is, or how all of this was put together and presented. So what is biomimicry? Biomimicry, the word comes from the Greek word bios, which means life, and mimesis means imitation. So essentially, in the words of Jeannine Benyus, biomimicry is the conscious emulation of life's genius. And what is life's genius? Okay. So again, life's genius is, in the words of Jeannine Benyus again, that after 3.8 billion years of evolution, nature has learned what works, what is appropriate, and what lasts. And this is a very important thing to note, because often enough when we look at the history of Earth or history of life on Earth, we realize that the Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. The history of life on Earth is 3.8 billion years old. Trees from the Devonian period are 416 million years old. Man, like a history of mankind, is only 2 million years old. And if we look at modern technology, it's only 100 years old. So if we were to convert the life of man, forget modern technology, life of man on the history of the Earth, and if we were to convert this entire time spectrum into a 24-hour clock, this is what you come across. And before midnight. Okay, so that is how nascent or how new we are to the Earth. And when we talk about the subject of biomimicry, so a lot of biomimics do emphasize on the importance of looking at Earth before us, because what has become a fossil. And if we want to continue being regenerative, or if we want to continue our existence, we have to look at nature, we have to look at its models, learn from it, so that, we do not follow a pattern which currently we seem to be following, is where we are exploiting the Earth rather than learning from it. So what does it mean to emulate nature or emulate the life's genius? Or what does it mean to mimic bios? So there are 9 principles of biomimicry, and they are such. It says that nature runs on sunlight. Any example that you see in nature runs on sunlight. It uses only the energy it needs. Nature fits form to function. Nature recycles everything. Nature rewards cooperation. Nature banks on diversity. It demands local expertise. Nature curbs excesses from within, and nature taps the power of limits. So these are predominantly the 9 principles that whenever we look at anything organic in nature for inspiration, we'll come across some of these common parameters. Okay. To take this a step further, when we compare what we observe in nature or biology, and when we compare that to engineering or products designed by man, we come across some of these comparisons. So in the first comparison, when we are comparing biology to engineering, we see that biology is hierarchical, whereas engineering is mostly monolithic. Biology, the interface allows separate control of stiffness and fracture. Engineering has less interfaces. In nature, the growth is by adaptive accretion. Engineering, it relies on fabrication. Nature, environmentally influenced self-assembly, okay, or environmentally responsive. In engineering, the response is very limited. In nature, everything is capable of growth and repair. Engineering, the system is obsolete. So for example, if even if you cut off a branch of a tree, after a while, it'll regenerate, it'll grow again. We know that systems in engineering, so for example, if in your plumbing system there's a leak, it has to be maintained. An engineered pipe does not know how to repair itself. Another example, when we look at biological systems and man-made systems, the other comparison is Biological systems are complex. They are ever evolving. Man-made systems are simple. Again, natural systems serve on closed loop flows of resources, as a linear flow of resources, man-made systems. Biological systems are densely interconnected and symbiotic, which is lacking in man-made systems. Natural systems adapt to consistent change and they result in zero waste. Now, waste is a concept of man-made society. Like, it's a concept that humans have come up with. In nature, there's nothing like waste. Everything works in a closed loop cycle. Again, in natural systems, there are no long-term toxins used. So essentially, natural systems work with 11 elements. Now, the 4 elements that we talk about, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, are available in all organic living matters. And the other 7 elements are also present there. But when we talk about man-made systems or engineered systems, we're using all the elements, like, on the element table on the chart, we're using all the elements and we don't know how they come together. So the result could be toxic or wasteful. Okay, so biological systems are distributed and diverse. They run mostly on solar income, and they're optimized as a whole, regenerative, and use local resources. If we look at this, if we look at actually the material application, we'll realize that man-made systems are not as resilient. And it's actually proven that out of, like, the man-made systems, the manufacturing processes rely on the heat, beat, treat system. And in this process, 96% of the material is actually, the outcome of it is as a waste product. So moving ahead, like I said, it's like, my research dissertation was inspired from, like, design looking at biology. So I when I started, I knew that I wanted to do something on the lines of biomimicry, on nature. Of course, in biomimicry, I could have chosen either flora or fauna to be inspired. And around that time, it was very interesting. Like, Shashidhar Kashyap sir, Dr. Kashyap was my mentor, my guide. And for the first 1 month or so, he told me, he's like, Sunanda, just keep your mind open, look at everything around you. And I think that that advice or that guidance personally worked for me. And I'm sure that he modified or he customized his guidance or his advice to each of his students separately, because he said, whereas there were some guides who were saying, okay, come to us after you've read 20 academic papers or after you've read 5 books. The first 1.5 months, he said, like, just keep your mind open, look at the world around you, be inspired. And if I feel that, like, you straying too far away from your topic, then we'll rein you in. But the first 1 month, don't just focus on biomimicry, on trees, look at the world around you, look at nature around you, read poetry, read books that may seem unrelated, and be inspired. And when he said that, like, with this, and I'm mentioning this anecdote over here because it was a process, and in retrospect, I realized it worked beautifully for me. Because when he said that, I was like, okay, so whenever I would come across a word, I wasn't fixated, or I didn't have a conical vision only for biomimicry or trees or water pumps. What I was looking at was, like, how patterns are working in nature. Is there a commonality? And like you can see in the image on the screen in front of you, so the top left is actually trees, like, the branching of the trees. On the right, it's lightning. On the left, if you see, this is actually the roots of rivers. This is a satellite image. The next is a fern, and the image on the right, bottom right, is actually the synapses, the brain synapses, like, in that have been formed. And around this time, like, I came across this quote by Paulo Coelho in his book, The Alchemist. It says, when you want something, the entire universe conspires in helping you to achieve it. I think this sentence became more popular by Shah Rukh Khan in the movie Om Shanti Om, when he said, जब आप किसी चीज को शिद्दत से चाहो तो पूरी कायनात आपको उसको मिलाने में लग जाती है. And it's just not dialogues, it's just not movie. Like, I think actually at one point when you believe in it, when you are, when the rigor is there, or when you're looking at a topic, you do come across a lot of these inspirations, okay, in very strange and beautiful ways. So some of you would recognize this poster, that whom you're looking at is Katniss, and this is a poster from the Hunger Games Catching Fire. And like I said, so Kashyap sir had said, like, keep your mind open, and, like, don't be fixated or anything. So one afternoon, I was, like, just surfing through the channels, and this movie was going on. And it was very interesting when it came at a scene over here where it's like, in the 75th Hunger Games. So Katniss is like, in the forest, and she receives a gift from Haymitch, and it says drink up. And what she has received is a spile. And that was the first time I came across a term, what a spile is. So I quickly wrote it down. And like, after the movie got over, of course, you can't leave the Hunger Games while the movie is going on, that sacrilege. But after the movie got over, I looked up what a spile is and came across this information that you see on your right of your screen. A spile is basically, it is this member that you insert into a tree, and this sap from the tree is actually extracted. And this, what you see, the image over here, is how you all would be familiar with maple syrup. So this is how, like, when the spile is dug into, like, going all the way into the xylem of a maple tree, the sap is extracted, and that sap is later on boiled to create the syrup. So what you see over here is maple water. Inspired from this, then I came across this image on the internet. And this image was, I think, what rocked my world. It was very inspiring. And this image is of the Terminalia tree, which is found in South India and South Asia, Southeast Asia. And over here, you can see, like, when the part of the tree has been spread, you actually have water coming out. In the morning walks, and all of you would be familiar with this, when you go in the morning for a walk, you'll see that there are some dewdrops at the edge or at the tip of the leaves. And like I said, like, I was in a frame of mind where I was looking at everything around me with very hungry eyes. And I was like, where can I find the inspiration? And when I came across these images, I was like, oh, great, interesting. What is it? And this is what is called as guttation. Okay. So already, like, if we talk about plants, if you're talking about the movement of water in plants, we do know that, like, there is a negative pressure, there's a positive pressure, there is osmosis, and some of these terms we know about. But the idea was, how does all of it come together? And over here, I'm showing you with the processes some of the inspirations in nature that got me going. Okay. So reverting back to, like I was saying, there were some patterns that we were observing in nature. So on the left is easily recognizable patterns: lightning, fern, and the venation of a leaf. Okay. On the right, what you see is, again, on the top right is an image of the leaf of a eucalyptus plant. Below that is a branching system of a tree. And below that, what you're seeing is actually a branching in the blood vessel system, in the blood vessels that are found in animals and humans. Okay. So the patterns that we saw in nature, what we were seeing around us, now there had to be a scientific reasoning to it. I mean, we know that when we talk about, like, when we talk about, like, gravity, when we talk about the apple falling down, the apple had fallen on Newton's head, but why was it that Newton questioned it? Like, why is it that the apple? So again, when we a lot of these observations that we see in nature, there are scientists who are getting into that rigor research and asking what is happening and why. So I came across some of these laws. So even though the law of thermodynamics say that, like, things go from high to low, okay, or hot to cold. Now, when we look at trees, here we see trees. Trees are the only living organisms who are actually carrying water across their vertical length against gravity. So as per the law of thermodynamics, everything should come from up to down. Why is it that trees are able to take water from down to up? So what is at play over here? So that was explained by constructor law, which said that energy will find the quickest way to reach its source. Fine enough. Then that was supported by Murray's law. Murray's law looks at the branching pattern of plants and in blood vessels. And what the Murray's law says is that plants and animals have to, the living organisms, they have to exert a lot of energy. And in order to make that flow of energy, or that flow of fluids or nutrients or blood effective, what they have to do is they have to rely on a branching system. And that branching system is what is known as Murray's law. So the similar process that you see in a tree or in a blood flow is that, like, it starts with a wider stem or a wider diameter, and, like, the vessels or the cross section keeps becoming smaller in size. we all know about the golden ratio, or the, like, derived from the Fibonacci system. A little more about that in a minute. So the Lindenmayer system is again the system of branching that is seen in leaf venation, and it is used as it's used as the thumb rule for developing morphogenetical anatomy, or different, when we talk about algorithms. So when we talk about fractals, leaf Voronoi, soap bubbles, are basically all derived from the L system. When we talk about the Fibonacci system, like we know, the ratio 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. Okay. And this Fibonacci system, when I started observing in the trees around me, I realized that whereas not all trees, like you wouldn't find this Fibonacci system in a coconut tree, but most of the trees, if you did cut a cross section, you would see the same pattern. And here is where I was saying, so earlier when my guide had said, just sit back and observe the world around you. That's what I actually did. I would go in the park, go in the garden, and just sit and look at trees. And I realized that I think for the first time, I was looking at trees with a new eye. And I think I may mention this again later, but what I learned from this research process was to be more cognizant and to be more aware of the world around us. Okay, so based on some of these theories or some of these laws, so these were the laws: constructal, Murray, Lindenmayer system, Fibonacci systems. These were laws that were observed in nature. But like I mentioned earlier, you have some laws that you observe in nature, but how does it translate to possibly something that you can calculate? So as opposed to the Murray's law, I came across two laws, the Hagen-Poiseuille's law and the Young-Laplace equation. And these were the equations that helped me calculate what actually the Murray law was supporting. So the Murray's law said that it's if you reduce the cross section of the pipes, the volume and the pressure of the fluid flowing through them increases. Young-Laplace equation says that the smaller the diameter or the cross section of a vein, the higher the water goes. So even though, so we had seen this in nature, and here were two theorems that were actually be able to providing a formula that could be calculated and converted into something else. And predominantly my research was based on observation, on these formula, on extrapolation, and proposing a system. And why the system at that stage could not be built, but it could, if it is ever able to be built, it is a possibility that it can be done. I'll be explaining that through the research process. Okay. So continuing with biomimicry. So what were the examples in nature? This is a Namibian beetle that you can see. And the way it works is it works on the process of radiation. So the body of the Namibian beetle is black. It lives in the desert in Namibia. Every morning it comes out, it inclines itself in this certain angle facing towards the sun. And what happens is it's because of its body. So its body is black, it absorbs, takes a lot of heat. And in the morning fog, that air touches its surface and creates this process of condensation. And because of the inclination of the Namibian beetle, he or she, whatever, is able to have its fill of the drink and then scurry back to the desert. Now, this is a very important adaptive process for the Namibian beetle to survive in the desert. The same process was then incorporated to make this self-filling bottle. So this process of condensation, we have seen it in nature. What they did is the designers of the Dew Bank designed this bottle, and on the stainless steel, what happens is because of the serrations, if you keep it in the morning, automatically the fog or the breeze, the atmospheric air comes into contact with it. It creates water droplets. Those water droplets go into this tubular space that you see, and then it can be drunk from. But this process, this is what we're seeing in the animal world. If we see it in the plant world, you also know about transpiration. So if you would tie a bag to a leaf, you'd realize that all plants are transpiring. When we talk about evaporation, transpo-evaporation or transpiration, it is a process where trees are taking in the water from the soil and they are then evaporating it or releasing out into the atmosphere. And this process is what makes the natural pump within the tree work. Okay, so and again, one fun fact on transpiration is that of all the water that the tree absorbs or a plant absorbs, 98% of it is released back into the atmosphere as transpiration. Only 2% of the water is actually consumed by the plant. Why is that? I'll be touching upon that in another slide or two. Okay. So this example we've seen. Another example how architects were incorporating the same principles to make something meaningful is this is the Warka water towers. Warka is a tree in Ethiopia, and designers Vogler and Vittori were inspired. They created a mesh which worked on the same principle. This principle has actually also been used by the farmers in Chile for many years. They would capture the fog, and this entire process, like, if it could be high tech, can be called an atmospheric water generator, or it could actually be working like this, which is a natural process. And what would happen, like you can see in the image in the center, is all that water is diverted into a central vessel where that water is collected, and it is pure water that can be then consumed. So this works in places where water, like, there isn't sufficient water. Okay. This were some examples. So what you see on the left is a palm-sized tree. It's the world's smallest tree that has been designed by scientists in Cornell University, Abraham Stuck and Tobias Wheeler. And when I came across this example, what I began to look at was the materiality. And based on that, I started looking at what are the materials. On the right, what you see is actually the root, the cross section of a root of a plant. And it shows that, like, how the surface area works towards wicking. So these were inspirations in nature that were giving ideas. Okay. So the research focused on water and electricity. Okay. Now you may seem until now that the focus is water, 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 but the design problem wasn't essentially water. The design problem started with electricity. Okay. Because we know in buildings, when we are pumping water, to pump water a certain height. So yes, we're talking about water going anti-gravity, water going vertical, but again, going back to principle of thermodynamics. So we say water comes from top to down. But if it has to go from down to up, you have to apply mechanical pressure on it. So when we look at pumps, that is like, it works with the principle of thermodynamics. But a different principle is at play when we look at trees. So the design problem was this, that, like, access to electricity in developing countries is minimal. And to highlight on this, I'd like to, like, read aloud what you, for example, see that we are saying that by 2040, 75% population of the world will be living in cities. Cities are going to go vertical. So it's like we're saying 3 billion people have to be provided water. Now water, if it has to go higher, comes with a certain cost. And if we want the entire thing to work, we have to ensure that we have enough electricity, because how can we have cities without water? But the sad situation is, for example, in Kathmandu, in summers, it's able to supply only 1/3 of the total water demand to its 1 million residences. Why? Because in summers, there's just no electricity. So to repeat, biomimicry is the conscious emulation of life's genius. It relies on treating nature as a model, measure, and mentor. And over here, trees were my mentors and my models. So it is like, trees transport gallons of water against the pull of gravity across the site daily. And my intent was to, like, how do they do this without a pump? Is there a hidden secret pump at their base that we do not know about? And this was the idea. This is a vision that I started with. Can we someday have buildings that, like, that we could just have a branching system outside or inside of a building, and that is how water, like, the way water from the soil is being taken, maybe water from the soil or a source can actually be taken up a building naturally. Thank you. So when we look at this slide, I'll explain the left image for a minute. So when we are looking at the ascent of sap within a tree, we are looking that there are many actions at play over here. And very briefly, like, to explain what those properties are to help you appreciate the system better. So there are two essentially things are happening. There is a water transfer happening at the soil level, and then there's a water transport happening throughout the entire tree. So this arrow towards the left in blue that you see is basically, it says that, like, the atmospheric pressure is at a higher negative pressure than the pressure that is experienced within the soil. So you'll realize that the pressure within the soil is minus 0.3 megapascal, but the atmospheric is minus 100 megapascal. Okay, and this this entire flow of negative pressure is happening because the atmospheric pressure is much lower than the pressure at soil. But this is what is creating the pump. So even if you look at a hand pump, when we talk about a displacement pump or a hand pump, like, just it works on suction, it works on negative pressure and positive displacement. A similar idea would be like, for example, if you have a juice box, this is Chas, and I'm not advertising for Amul, but you'll see, like, if you want to drink from this, you basically need a straw. And what a straw does is the moment, like, for example, you put a straw and you suck on it, what you are exerting on the straw is essentially negative pressure. So that is what a tree is doing during the day. Okay. So to explain the model, so one, the roots are taking water through the process of osmosis. Then through the osmosis, like we know, within the stem of a tree, there are phloems and xylem. So phloem is responsible for the flow of nutrients, but xylems are the one that are responsible for the flow of water. Okay, why water? I'll explain it in a while, but it's also mentioned on the right top of your screen. Okay, so but how does it xylem ensure that the water is going up, like, in the tracheids? So the physics that's working over here is cohesion and it is adhesion. So cohesion is the force of water molecules with each other, and adhesion is the force that exerts between the water molecules and the surface. So it's important, like, that the surface has to be taken into account, and also the strong cohesive bonds that are formed between water because of the strong hydrogen bonds, and they have known to be very strong, which I'll again elaborate more in the experiments. Essentially, now, why is this entire suction happening? Like we said, in the case of a straw, we know that we're pulling at the top of the straw, and that is why the liquid is coming up. What is happening is that every leaf, the farthest leaf, has stomata. And what a stomata does is, when we talk about a stomata surrounded by a guard cells which opens and closes, and this activity happens during the daytime, is it ensures photosynthesis. So what a leaf is doing for the entire tree is it's taking carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, water from the soil, and through the process of photosynthesis in the presence of sunlight, converting it into nutrients and oxygen that it's releasing. So this absorption of carbon dioxide and release of oxygen is happening through the stomata. And every time the stomata is opening and closing, you actually, like, it is creating that negative pressure. So the moment it opens up, it is exposing the entire water that was there in that vertical stem, or that entire vertical system. It's ensuring that it's pulled up. Another interesting thing to note over here is that when we look at the water that's coming out from the stomata, it's in the form of vapor. So this is another interesting thing that, again, I may emphasize upon later, is the fact that water in a plant has a metastable nature, which means in a pump, your underground tank would have water and your output would have water. When we look at water in a tree, so it's absorbing water from the soil, but what is coming out is in the form of vapor. But this is also very interesting because there are a lot of naturalists who are actually saying that the largest invisible river is possibly above the Amazon forest. Because, like we said, 98% of all that water above the forest has been transpired. So you don't see it, but what it contributes to is, like, the humidity and the condensation and the rain. And those are some of the concepts that a lot of people are talking about, the, like, the biotic pump in the nature. Okay. So coming to the research, we'll be looking at very briefly at the 18 experiments, the 28 comparisons, and the 8 parameters. Now, the 8 wasn't intentional. I just realized that subsequently. Okay. So what were the experiments? What were the 18 experiments? Like I've earlier explained what the inspirations were. And so the first, it started with, like, the wicking properties of paper. And we know that tissue paper wicks water much faster than, like, your conventional paper on which you're writing. The second experiment was, can a tissue paper be used to transport liquid? So those experiments were done and were seen that, yes, if water is at the same level and you put a wicking paper or tissue paper between a full glass and an empty glass, both of the glasses will come to an equal level. If your filled up glass is higher, it will empty to the lower glass. If your empty glass is higher, then nothing will happen. In the third experiment, you can see over here is, so with the help of Dr. Lattu, he gave me this plant sample, which is Peperomia pellucida, and it was embedded in this plant disafranin. And after that, like, so I took the help of like Professor Mamta Jadhav and Sunita Nair, NG Acharya College, and they helped me use the microscope. So magnified at 10,000x, I was able to look at, like, you know, what you see, those dark colored cells are basically the tracheids, and you can see, like, you know, that actually they have been marked with the saffron and the plant dye. It shows that, like, you know, the water was actually pulled up. Then we look at height of capillarity, like we said, like, you know, earlier we'd seen the Young-Laplace equation. In experiment 4, so what I did is, one was that I put the equation in place and did some calculations. And then I was able to procure from some medical stores capillary pipes of diameter from 0.05 mm, 1 mm, 1.5 mm, and 2 mm. So in the 5th experiment, you can see the Young-Laplace equation says that for a 1.5 mm bore, water would rise to 1.98 centimeters. When I put a 1.5 mm bore in water, the natural water rise observed was 2.1 centimeters. So the results were comparative. Then to go to the next, cohesion board. So when I'm talking about these experiments, I'm showing that it was not just literature review, what we read. All these experiments at a smaller framework were actually tested. So in the 6th, like, you know, the water that rose in the capillary, when I moved it, within the capillary, it was able to move, like, you know, as one solid column of water. So that showed that, like, you know, the cohesion strength between the water molecules is strong. The impact of the cross section, now my the capillary tubes I got were circular in diameter. I couldn't come across square or rectangular, but these were some formulas, and based on that, we're like, okay, like, you know, let's go ahead with what we have, because mostly trochoids are organic shape, not necessarily circular, but definitely not square and rectangular. Then impact of shape. So it was found that if like, you know, some of these capillary tubes under a lighter, I changed their forms, and the height of capillarity, height of water that rose to the level remained the same, but it was seen that when there were more undulations, the speed of water that moved within the capillary was faster. Now, again, another thing is that when water rises in a capillary, it will rise to a certain level. But even if it rises till the top level, like, you know, if I would cut the capillary and see that it rises to the top level, it wouldn't flow out, because what's happening within is adhesion and cohesion. But again, the negative suction because of atmospheric pressure that allows the water come up will not allow the water go out. So over there, we realized that we need something that would work like a positive displacement pump. In experiment 10, again, another idea was like, one is where we are looking at a tissue paper, the wicking properties of tissue paper. Number is a query, if we were to encase the tissue paper within, let's say, a plastic sheet. So the moment we're doing that, we're changing the atmospheric pressure that the paper is exposed to. And it was seen that when it was sheathed or covered, the water rise was higher. The next 11th experiment is where I created this system. It was a small assembly, and the piston. Why we used a piston is because earlier I gave an example of a hand pump, and a hand pump basically works on suction and positive displacement. Okay. So the same principle was observed over here, because we realized that water in a capillary will rise to a certain height, but to let that water come out, you'll have to apply some suction. And after that water has been collected, to then force it out again, you'll have to provide some positive pressure. And that was what was seen in experiment number 12. 13, then based again on literature review, what we did is we compared the PSI, or like, you know, the pressure that the tree exerts on water that rises for a feet, and the pressure that a pump exerts on water to make it rise for 1 feet. And based on those calculations and based on the reading, it was realized that trees actually exert about 2.7 times or 3 times more pressure than a pump. And the flow rates of a pump are naturally much higher. The diameter of the tubes are much higher. There were some comparisons done for sorptivity to see that, like, you know, in which case water rose the highest. Like earlier we said, we were doing these comparisons with the diameter of the pipes. Now there's another thing, like, you know, when we say that water, when we're trying to compare trees with like, you know, the transportation of water in trees with the transportation of water in buildings. Now a tree may be to a height of 3 meters, or Young-Laplace is saying that if you use a bore pipe of diameter 0.01, water will rise to a height of 3 meters. But if I want to rise water to a higher level, like, you have trees that are 20 meters high. How does water go to 20 meters high? Are the tracheids, size of tracheids or xylem becoming much smaller? So what is in play over here? So it was observed that within trees, they have a overlap or a connection, and between every two pipes, like, the one is the principle that we studied under Murray's law. The other thing is between two tracheids, they also have these pores that allow water to transport or pass from one hollow tube to the next hollow tube. Okay, so when we started studying about, like, how, so we looked at the diameter, but we are also looking at the length of these capillary tubes. So the next experiment was about that, where for the same diameter, I saw how much water was being drawn up for, like, took 4 different heights of it. Results I'll be showing next. So experiment 17 was impact of radius on volume, and 18 was impact of numbers on volume. And these were the results. So we saw that if the bore diameter was increased, obviously we know that if the number of capillary pipes is increased, the volume of water that's collected would be more. But we realized that if the bore is increased, then definitely you have more water. But we also realized that if you increase the height, there isn't a substantial increase in the volume, because and assembly that was used as assembly on the right side. So which means that the moment you're pulling the piston, so the length of the piston is determining the pressure that you can exert at any point of time. So for the same amount of pressure, if the height was lower, which in the first case you see it was 10 centimeters, the volume of water was much higher than when the length was increased to 30 centimeters. So through all these 18 experiments, what we realized was that the way trees work is they have a lot of shorter capillaries or hollow tubes within them, which we know as tracheids, and they are interlaced with each other to actually start from the root level and reach to the last leaf on the tree at the farthest end through a system of branching to ensure that water reaches every part of the tree and effectively. And all through this process, on the left, we have explained the diagram on the left. On the right, what you see is Burj Khalifa. And in Burj Khalifa, like, we talk about it as the highest building. The height of the building is 830 meters. So for 830 meters, now if just one pipe or one pump was put, the pressure exerted on that pipe would be humongous. And the pressure of it could actually cause the pipe to explode. So what they have done over here is they have used an intermediary system where water from the base goes to one pump at one level, from there it transports to another level and the next. So some of this system, like we saw it in Nature, the literature review was also based on what's happening in the modern world. And based on these two, then I was able to come up with my findings. So I will not be getting into the details of these 28 findings, but these were, and it wasn't an intentional number. It was just that I was like, how much ever comparison that we can do. So there were these 28 points where we were able to compare mechanical pumps with trees. So the parameters of flow rate, what is the volume of water, what is the pipe diameter, energy input, number of parts, water sources, what's the predominant force, what's the water output, what is cavitation. The cavitation, you don't want a blocking happening in pipes or even within a tree. It's called embolism. So what is the force of pressure and can it split the pipe? So all of those things were studied. And based on that, the analysis was that the two major differences between trees and mechanical pumps is, one is state change. Like we said, in a tree, what goes inside a tree is water, what comes out is actually vapor. So that's state change. And the other was intermolecular forces. So stronger bonds. So the findings was that capillary action seen in trees, transpiration pull mostly work constant. So it said that pipe a very hollow, a small board or small diode hollow pipe, it will still need a certain suction force to be exerted on it to pull the water out. The water bonds are so strong there that they're actually able to overcome the gravitational force. Atmospheric pressure, the outer atmospheric pressure will not allow the water to be discharged in the same state condition. So over here, if we want to discharge the water, like, after we've collected it in a tank, if we want to discharge it to another one, we'll have to use, like, both the positive pressure displacement pump and a suction pump. Suction pumps, technically or theoretically, they cannot lift water higher than 10.34 meters. Now, this is theoretically, but when we put atmospheric pressure, when we put different temperatures, humidity criteria into play, it works for 7 meters in the practical situation. So based on those comparisons, those analysis, then 8 principles were determined, 8 parameters. And based on these 8 parameters that are observed in trees, I proposed a biomimetic system that could emulate the same principles. So the same principles of hydraulic physics that were being employed in a tree capillary action suction was taken in the biomimetic system. For the state change, we said that we'll have to provide a pump so that, like, the state change the state of water remains the same, the change doesn't happen. So again, for intermolecular forces to overcome that, we devised that we'll have to provide a pump. Impact of numbers. So when we're saying that for this system to work, we have to have multiple hollow pipes that come together and work interconnectively for the water to rise. It will have to be a modular system because, like we said, it's like if you want more volume of water, you have to step it up. If you make just one tall system, the pressure that will be exerted on that pipe could actually explode the pipe. The Murray's law of branching was used as explained. Now there's a very interesting thing, like, Julian Vincent said that in nature, less material is used and more design is used. And that is what we can also see in the branching system. So in the same principles, the biomimetic pump was proposed, and it will be a solar powered system. So the same principle that we can see in a tree, the same principle would be also be employed in the biomimetic system, where we're saying that the slight suction or the negative pressure that needs to be created would be done with the help of a solar powered system. Okay. So proposals, recommendations, and conclusions were such that some ideas were proposed based on transpiration, guttation, and capillary action. So these were seen in independent terms, and then we can combine some of these together, and 3 cases were come up with. So again, when I started with the project, the idea was that it will work for maybe a 7-story structure or a 24-meter structure. So that was the base criteria that I started with. And based on that, like, so what you see in the center is the assembly that I worked with. But the idea was that if we work with the same assembly till 3 meters, if we use a bore of 0.01 mm dia, 3-meter rise will be natural, and 3 meters is the height of our floor to floor height, most residential buildings. So till that height, the water would rise naturally. After that, suction pump will have to be employed to draw all this water out, collect, like what you see in it towards the left side, that tray that you see. So that is where, like, to draw it out, you'll need a little suction. And then the capillary acts naturally. So this was a step-up system. And this is happening at every 3-meter level. It could be incorporated with the elevation of the facade. And this step-up system, like we've seen earlier in Burj Khalifa, is also being practiced. What you see in the center are some of the experimental images that we're doing. And the other idea was, one was, like, earlier I created an artist impression where we are saying that the entire system works on the wall facade or the framework on the wall. But the other idea was that if such an assembly of such hollow tubes could be come up with. Now, if you're saying that the bore, the diameter is so small, some may argue that the system may be a little fragile. So to ensure that the safety, the structural integrity is maintained, it could also be embedded maybe within the wall or a column system. So that was a different proposal. The idea is to draw all that water from the base of the building till the top of the building. This was another case 2. And so in the, like we said, case 1, 2, 3. So in 1, the rise was every 3 meters, 2, it was 6 meters, and in case 3, it was every 9 meters. So in case 2, like you can see, like, so this comparison on your top right that you can see is being given for all 3 cases. And so we're saying that for the base 3 meters, you don't have to apply any pressure. Only a certain amount of pressure has to be applied for the suction, so for the water to be drawn out. And then we said in case 2, if we are applying a little negative pressure, we might as well use it to, like, after that 3 meters was natural, to only for the balance 3 meters, because rather than drawing all the water up to 24 meters, if you're doing this way, we are still saving on energy. Another thing was that, like, we did, like, if you look at the calculation below that, it was like the comparison was done between, for example, 100 mm diameter pipe and a 0.01 mm dia. So to give you an idea of how small a 0.01 mm dia is, if we look at a hair, so a thick hair, the diameter of a thick hair is 0.1 mm. And the diameter of thin hair is 0.04 mm. So we are looking at actually a cross section that is thinner than the human hair, and it has to be hollow. So when we're saying 0.01 mm, we're talking about a hollow structure. And we realize that, like, for example, if we want such a small cross section to be working and to pull water up naturally to a height of 3 meters, we would actually need 10 crore hollow segments to be able to draw the water equivalent to 100 mm dia. So, like, when I was doing this entire process, like, from time to time, I would go to Dr. Kashyap and I'm like, sir, I don't know if this system is doable at all, because how do we get such a small cross section? And his advice was wonderful. He's like, see, after you do all your experiments and after you extrapolate all the information, you will know whether that system is doable or not, whether it works or it doesn't work. So he's like, even if you find out it doesn't work, it doesn't mean that your dissertation failed. You will just have done this entire process, and at the end of it would have realized that after we do all of this, it doesn't work. So at this point, like, after doing the extrapolations, the calculations, the observations in nature, the literature review and all of that, I was able to devise a system that I know theoretically works. But it is limited by technology right now, because I could not come across any material that is so fine. So in conclusion, it was that the water transportation mechanism of a tree can be replicated, yes, and it will rely mostly on capillary tube system and solar powered suction pump. The limitations of a system, however, would be that it will have comparatively low volumetric flow. It will have a higher retention time, and it will have to be stepped every few meters, like 3 or 6 or 9 meters. But again, over here, because it was drawn from, like, the inspiration from nature. So there's this very interesting quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson, where he says that adopt the pace of nature, her secret is patience. And in continuation, so like I said, I started with, like, a system that would work for low-rise buildings. Essentially, like I said, the focus was not so much on water. It started with electricity. So this system would work very well in places where places that are off grid, places where, like, so even in agricultural lands, we have solar pumps. So it's like, it could work on that system. That is one. The other thing was, like, it would work in places where the buildings are not too high, maybe ground +1, ground +2 story. So there it would work more effectively. If we superimpose this on a taller structure, actually, like, potential savings would be lost because of the cost of pump that we need to employ at every level. The material proposed again over here, because, like, when I came across this small cross section, like I told you about, thinner than the human hair, I was reading on, like, 3D printing and biological 3D printing. And in recent medical science, human ear, human organs have begun to be 3D printed. They have been able to 3D print ear, lung, heart, but not yet blood vessels, because for blood vessels, it has to be very fine. But they'll reach there. So my proposal was, like, to 3D bioprint this system, and again using lignin. Now lignin, so when so if we use the same material that is seen in tree, we are ensuring that the adhesion properties of like, the water to the surface would be ensured. And despite its limitations, if we use it in a rural setup, which is off-grid, I think it will work. And even in an urban system, now when we did a cost comparison, it was found pumps, if we look at the total energy consumption of a building, pumps essentially consume only about 1 to 1.5 or 2% of the building is 2% of the total energy that a building uses. And this seem as very less. So I'm not saying that my research proposal, if it were built, would save the world. No, it's only a 1% or a 2% better, but it's still 1% better than what we have right now. And the idea, it started with some places don't have electricity. The other thing is the electricity that we are getting from a thermal power plants right now, one day would come to an end. When the coal plants, like, when we run out of all coal in 200 years, or essentially, like, even when we're mining all that coal, it is creating a lot of pollution, acid rains, land pollution and stuff. So the idea was to look at something that's green and something that is more inspired from nature. So over here, it's like, this quote is that listen to the trees as they sway in the wind. Their leaves are telling secrets. And I would like to end with this thing, this image that nature is not on the internet. So I do know that right now, because of the pandemic, most of us are at home, but truly, if as a biomimic, if you want to be inspired from nature, you actually have to go out in the nature and be inspired from the natural world that you see around. So that was it. Over to you, Roshni ma'am. And if I think if there are any questions, you could answer. I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Yeah, that should be fine. Thank you, Sunanda. That was a wonderful, wonderful presentation. So much in detail, so much to learn, and so much more to take off from here. I would just like to add something to this wonderful work that you have done. And again, I go back to this quotation from the book, The Forest by Peter Ward, where he talks about the giant sequoia trees of California, which have to pump water up to a height of 450 feet in order to get it to the topmost leaves, because they are so tall. So the kind of suction pump that would be required to do such a work, it would be, so he says atmospheric pressure at sea level is only about 15 pounds to the square inch, and this limits the height that a suction pump can raise water to a mere 33 feet. Not only does the tree attain the tremendous pressure required, but it does so with a speed of flow so great that in certain trees, water rises at the speed of almost 150 feet an hour. That is really tells us a lot, that what to learn from nature. And there are some questions here. But before I go to that, I wanted to ask Sunanda a few more things as to, you did this research a few years ago, and would you think I'm sure you have kept on reading on this topic and doing more research. So what is it that you think in retrospect about this research? Would you want to add something? Would you think that something else could have helped you, or anything now that when you look back on your research?
I think when I look back at this research, in a manner of speaking, I'll say, quite honestly, like, for example, I had enrolled in my master's program 12 years after BR program. And it was a great learning experience. So it's like, but I think my learning from my dissertation specifically introduced me to a new way of seeing the natural world around me, a new, I think, way of just looking at things. And in a manner, I feel that it also did a slight course correction for me, where it, like, set me on a path of, like, because I went back to school, I realized that there's so much to learn and so much to share. And, like, I think that was a very important point, where, like, then led me to teaching. And, like, like you mentioned in the introduction, that I've been teaching at CTS College for the last 5 years. It's been a wonderful experience. And I also feel that every of those things, like in my literature review, so I'd separate chapters for biomimicry, for 3D printing, for water, for pumps, for trees, and for each one of them, I think I've been doing independent readings, and the journey still continues. So I think the biggest takeaway for me from that process was that it changed the way I observed, saw, and perceived the world around me. So
So in other words, you are still living and sleeping with your research, which was our motto when we asked the students to do research. We always said that you have to now live and sleep with this topic. So it seems that you're still doing that.
Yes, I'm married to it for the last 5 years now, happily married.
There's one question here from Suraj Sonar who says, hardness of water may play a crucial role when we apply this to a building, this concept. What are your thoughts on this?
So, Mr. Suraj, what you're saying is that yes, it would be true. The two ways of going about it. One is that, like I said, in a tree. So when we're talking about hardness of water, we talk about, like, in the case of a pipe. But when a tree is taking the water, it's two things are happening. Is one is osmosis, where it's able to separate out the salts. The other thing that's happening is the water that is rising within the xylems. So all those tracheids have pits between them, because what happens is a process even in pipes that's been found is cavitation, where you suddenly have air, and that bubble of air will block the water flow. So how a tree is able to circumvent that is through these holes that they have between two pipes possibly. So I think if we develop the system with the pores and that works on osmosis at a ground level, we should be able to take care of it. And of course, like, could also, like, later on, like, we mix softeners in water. Again, another thing, for example, for my dissertation, for this presentation, because we had to keep it within a certain time limit, I didn't get into the details, but in my delimitation, I had selected that I'm taking water, regular water, and, like, regular as in I'm saying I'm taking pure water. I'm not talking about, like, hard water or soft water, and I'm taking it at a regular a summer Mumbai temperature and humidity. So my temperature criteria also was between 25 to 35 degrees, and humidity was between 55 to 75 degrees. Because like I mentioned that, like, when the temperature humidity changes, the atmospheric pressure will change, and it'll affect on this. So like you mentioned, that was a part of my delimitation. I'm glad you asked that question.
Yeah, I think there's one more question here from architect Priya Darshini, who asked that if there is a instability in the water molecules, will there be a disturbance in the water distribution to every single tip of the leaf?
I don't know, quite honestly. I think someone who researches in water will be able to say that. But I think instability in water molecules would be something that would have to be added. If we're talking about natural water that is being drawn from the roots of a tree from the soil, it would have its nutrients. But I think possibly that is taken care of, because when we look at trees, I don't know, like, so for example, when I was studying about the fluid mechanics, I was looking at the intermolecular forces between water. And the other thing is that even though we know that in some places water could have arsenic or could have other nutrients, but until now even though we have records of some leaves showing more quality of certain elements, it has not harmed the tree per se in terms of those water nutrients in the water. But I think a botanist may be able to answer that question much better.
There is one more question from Meenal Yaram Shetty. Hi, Meenal. She's from Kamla Rajas. She's a professor. She asks, wouldn't there be a time lag in receiving water? And she also commends your presentation, an amazing presentation. But she's asking the question, I think that if you implement this system of yours, would there be a time lag in receiving water?
Meenal, hi, thanks for that question. Good question. Yes, there will be a time lag. And like I mentioned in the second slide of the conclusions, this system, when we're looking at nature, it is working a lot more slowly as compared to a mechanical pump. But essentially, if we are talking about a gravity pump system where we are saying all the water has been taken from conventional system, if we take an example for a minute, we are taking all the underground water to the overhead tank. collecting it over there and then discharging it down. So, and so we're saying if this process can be followed, what we're essentially doing is let the time lag be there. So all of that water is still going to an overhead tank. And from there, when it is being dispersed to, if a tap is being open, then there wouldn't be any time lag. But yes, there'll be a time lag for the water from reaching to ground zero or to the top level. Yes, but like when I mentioned Ralph Emerson's quote that nature tells us about patience. It's not a pronto, quick fix world.
Some more complex questions for you, Sunanda. There is one which says that, I see the name, this is Madhura Rairikar. If the trees are using sunlight for evaporation through stomata, can we use the same energy to pull the water upwards? I think which is what essentially you're saying, right? I don't know if you can answer this question.
Yes, but what I am proposing is a pump inspired from trees. The pump that I'm proposing would still be made out of lignin as a material or waste or capillary tubes. I am not designing a tree. I'm not God. So the stomata in the leaf has been has been planted there. It's a part of the leaf. It's a part of the leaf and the tree. But it's a good thought, if we could actually develop a system. What we essentially do have done over here is the opening and closing of the stomata. So we're saying during the day, because a lot of this activity during the day, we know carbon dioxide is absorbed, oxygen is released. And this activity, this opening and closing of the stomata is happening because of the guard cells that are responding to the sunlight. So in that case, and we are saying that opening and closing is what is creating suction. So possibly if it, I don't know, I'm just thinking aloud over here. If a sensor could be put that responds to solar action, and responding to that, it opens and closes, because the moment it opens, the moment the stomata opens is when the negative pressure is created. And that is what is pulling all the water up. So a very good idea over there. I think that could actually be explored to create a system that self-regulates in response to the sun and creates a pressure within the system.
There's a question from Mr. or Miss Oguntuna. In a residential multi-floor building where water use is high, can the water drawn be sufficient in such buildings using the concept that you have explained?
So what I did in this case for experimental model, I did it only equivalent to, when I'm saying you need 10 crore members, that is only for 100 mm dia pipe. If you create an extensive fabric across the entire facade, or embedded within, so the more members you have, the more water is rising. Like we said in some of the experiments that I had shown earlier, when the number of capillary tube increases, the volume of water that can actually be collected increases. So yes, but to answer your early part of the question, we saw that after every even if it's 3 meters and it's a natural water rise, to draw that water out of the capillary tube will require a certain small negative pressure. And if we were to use it in a very high-rise building, the cost of providing those pumps at every level would negate the benefit of having a system like this. But yes, it is doable.
Sachin Vedak, architect Sachin, hi Sachin, has asked this question. He's from LS Raheja, if I'm not mistaken. He's asking, instead of capillary tubes, the properties of sponge can also be an alternative. Was this also taken into consideration in your experiments?
Actually, good suggestion, Sachin. I took, I looked at the softivity of different materials, and when I was studying capillarity, also had a look at bricks and soil and other material. But to answer that, no, I didn't look at sponge. And the other thing is, maybe the reason why I was I didn't take it is there's a very common parlance about sponges. It says that sponge absorb more water when they're wet as compared to when they're dry. So, but essentially, I feel that what happens within a sponge is what is happening in most other porous materials, is the capillarity, where the water is forming strong cohesive bonds. and is moving up, and how high it is moving up depends on the cross section of the spaces, the cavities that it gets within it, and also what is the property of the material, how strong are the adhesive bonds. So sponge could definitely be a material, but I did not explore it.
Architect Priyadarshini, who had earlier asked you a question about the water molecules, is further asking a question if this method of water transportation, if it is applied to a building, will there be water leakage in the walls and roofs, etc.?
Priyadarshini, because two things. One is it is a design proposal and it's hypothetical. So depending on the material, maybe the outer sheathing will have to be done in a manner that there is no water leakage. So for example, the outer sheathing could still be in a material like, again, drawing back to the earlier experiments, we've seen that, like, if you have a material and you sheath it in an outer material, because of the play of atmospheric pressure, actually the rise is much higher. So we would propose to create this entire lignin printed system in something else. But between the lignin capillaries, we want it to leak, because that is what is happening within trees. And because of that, you don't have cavitation or embolism happening. Because the moment, like, their easy flow of water from one tube to the other is what is allowing the water to move much faster and higher. That is what, like, if, for example, if there's a blot, we clean it with a tissue paper. Or when you keep a tissue paper or even a cotton cloth on a blot or on water, because there's this interconnection is what is letting, like, the property, the cohesive property of water, cohesion bonds, is letting it move faster. So I think amongst within that, when we're saying 10 crore tubes, yes, we want leaking to happen. That would actually be beneficiary. But the outer, it could be sheathed in an outer envelope that would discourage it affecting from the wall elements, membrane or material.
There is one question from, or rather, a question from Vinod Selin, who's asking if you initiated or did a small model, like a working model, for this final proposal of yours, for the research study. Based on this research study, did you try to make a small working model?
Okay. So Mr. Vinod, like I showed in some of the 18 experiments earlier, I did create based on whatever I was reading to prove it, that it was true. Because one thing was observation, the second thing was theorems, and the third was what was it that I could see, read, and still be able to extrapolate or check for myself it's working. So I had created that small model which worked on a piston pump or a hand pump. So that was a small module that I worked, but I hit the roadblock where at the point where like when I did the comparison, it said that, like, you would need very fine 0.01 mm for it to rise to 3 meters. So, and the material would have been an issue. And I was honestly not able to find a capillary tube less than 0.05 mm. Though they said that in medical procedures, a very fine capillary is also available that's much finer, but that was in copper, wasn't easily available to me. And I wouldn't have been able to visually see what the water rise was. So I stuck with the glass capillary tubes. And that's why I'm saying towards the end of it, even though after extrapolating all that data, I would like to believe that it's doable, but no, I wasn't able to take it to its final conclusion and construct something. I'm waiting out another few years to actually make a kind of a fabric or something that would make it work.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic suggestion actually by Vinod, that to make, but I think you were all constrained by time. So time was a big factor, but I'm sure that you can still work on this. There's one continuous suggestion.
Dr. has been telling me do your PhD, and I'm like, हाँ sir, material आ जाने दो तो I'll do it.
There is one continuing suggestion from Mr. Oguchuna, I think. Where did I see it? About whether you are doing any publication on this in order for it to reach the larger public. So would you like to inform anything about that?
So again, when I was doing my master's, at that time I was the importance of writing academic papers was emphasized to us by our HOD, Dr. Roshni over here, and also Dr. Kashyap. They said, like, do write about it. And so biomimicry is a topic I've written about, and I've presented it in conferences and written academic papers and both articles on it. But I think until now, it still has restricted itself predominantly to academia and students. Though again, Dr. Kashyap keeps saying he's like, high time now you write a book, but actively haven't yet started on.
You have sent your publication, your research, this particular research for publication to PLIA, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, they had selected the abstract, and it would have happened. Conference would have happened this year, but we don't know what decision they're going to take. So in Spain, otherwise I was going to present the same paper and the findings this year, but because of the pandemic, we don't know what will happen. So let's see.
Okay, Sunita Matthew has a question. How much time would be required for water to reach a 3-meter high capillary? And accordingly, have you calculated how much time would be required to collect the required water volume for a normal 4-member family house?
Sunita ma'am, I didn't go into those details, but I can answer your first question. So for a 0.01 mm capillary, like, by what young Laplace says, it would take less than a second. It's instant. So if you would like, come across a very thin capillary, the moment you put it in water or any liquid solution, like, in my experiments, I'd colored the solution orange to be able to show the flow of water in the glass tubes. The moment you put the capillary in water, the water rises. So that process is instant. Irrespective of, like, whatever dia of pipe you put it. So there is no time to that. The time lag, which earlier was answered, may happen when we are stepping it up, and at every level you have to use a pump. So there might be a slight time difference over there for the water to be extracted and then go instantly up. But I did not calculate for a family. I was just calculating it for a building. But I'll keep this suggestion in mind.
There's a very interesting question about from Athira S about what is the thought on lack of sunlight in this process?
Very interesting question, Athira. And like trees, like I earlier mentioned, trees are doing this entire process of transpiration during day. So the other example that I showed of guttation, where you have water droplets at the edge of leaves, that is something because of the osmosis happens during the night. But otherwise, I have mimicked the process of transpiration within trees that happens during the day, because that is when the stomata in the leaves is able to regulate itself and open and close, looking at the water turgidity in the leaves and also the sun. So, but because for my biomimetic proposal, I've given a PV pump, we are looking at energy that can be, like, the solar energy that can be captured within 6 to 8 hours and with a battery backup. So it still works in response to the solar, but yes, I have incorporated some mechanical modern inputs to it. Because like I mentioned earlier, I don't know how to design a tree.
Wow, Sunanda, the questions are just flowing in. We might have to stay for a long time. But let me select some questions. There's one question by Deepali Singhevar, who's saying, how can this concept be used in design proposal for getting a Griha or IGBC green rating?
For now, the realistic answer is that this system is not available. Like, we will have to 3D print, even if it's not a lignin bioprinted model, we'll have to 3D print these fine hollow tubes, because like we're saying that the diameter of the hollow tubes is thinner than hair. And we, at least in my research, I couldn't come across any material that is available. But even if it were done and employed, I think under Griha and IGBC, it could come under the point of innovation, energy efficiency, and possibly saving of water. So water efficiency, energy efficiency, and innovation. But when the proposal comes, we'll surely go to Griha and IGBC and tell them, okay, a system like this is available now, make a special point for it.
Yeah, I think it could be an innovative point because all of these ratings do give you points for innovation. I'll take a couple of more questions. You mentioned about two properties concluded from the research. Can the state change property be used where for transportation it is vapor, but for use a quick condensation follows? This is by Shailaja Pasari.
Can you repeat that? I didn't get the...
In this, she's asking whether you can use this idea. I think she also draws it from your conclusion about state change property. You mentioned about change of state from water to vapor and so on. So can this be used as in for the transportation? It is in the form of vapor, and then at the point of use, it again there is a condensation, and then you get it. So can this be also thought of instead of the one that you proposed, is what I think she's asking.
Yes, it can be. Again, two things. One is if we were like in transpiration, the model that I showed earlier, when trees are transpiring, you can actually collect that water. Atmospheric water generators do that. They capture the water in the atmosphere or from transpiration, they collect it and they use it. But in the biomimetic pump, like I'm saying, trees was my inspiration. Trees is not what I designed. So the system that I propose using capillary tubes, cannot condense water on its own. And again, that is something that only the trees can do. So in my case, when I was studying at capillary tubes, the idea was to draw the water out. So I think even though that what your question you're saying is valid, and like we earlier mentioned that the invisible river above the Amazon, which has 20 billion cubic meters of water, it's actually been calculated, and that's more than the water in the Amazon river, which is only about 17 to 18 billion cubic meters. But to be able to capture all of that and condense it and use it, I don't know, that's something that can work with a tree, but not in the biomimetic system. Because again, the other thing is when I was in my research, I was looking at trees for inspiration, and it was important to also come across what their processes and their limitations. But what I was trying to do is not design another tree. I was trying to design another biomimetic pump. So I wanted to have an alternative for a pump, not an alternative for a tree. So in that case, I think my focus was like, in a pipe or in a pump, the water moves in the same state. And how can I devise a system in which the water will continue moving in the same state? So because that was my focus, my outcome was slightly different from what you're proposing.
There's one question I think that we can take one more. How about exploring actual plants on the facade to source water?
It was a thought initially, but again, there were a lot of issues. Like, we still have some places, like, for example, you see plants on the facade, you have ivy and everything else. Two things. One is the water that is able to be captured, like we saw in the example, transpiration is very less at every point of time. The other thing is, if it were the kind of a plant that would be, now again, depending on what kind of plant it is, a hardy plant would not take up so much water. Like, if we want to capture water, we want broad leaf plants or plants which are actually transpiring a lot. If we did that, and if it were on the surface of a building, your wall surface would get wet. And we all know, like, in the rainy season, we know if the wall gets wet, we have problems of fungus and spores and condensation. And I don't know how good that is. Then initially there was also another proposal where we were thinking we create a glass facade of film in which this can rise. But the idea was also to propose something that would be, that would respond to cost, and that would be something that is doable. So it's a good thought, and it if you explore it, I think you would get a response to it, but very limited. And it was something I explored in earlier stages, but then I discarded it.
I'm tempted to take some questions, but maybe not. Just one, maybe you can answer is what would be the cost for proposed capillary tube production? Would it surpass the cost for normal tube? This is by Sariya K.
Saria, that's what I said, that was my roadblock, where I couldn't come up with a material. And because I don't know who can manufacture it and what material, I couldn't come across with a case study. But studying the plants, studying the research, we realized that, like, xylem are made of lignin, and lignin is also an agricultural waste. So that is why I propose, like, these days, increasingly 3D printing technology is becoming very affordable and reasonable. And 3D printing uses an ink base, which could, like, so when Norman Foster is proposing a lunar village on the moon, he says that he'll use moon soil, regular. Or when in China, they're designing 3D printed houses, they're using concrete. When you have some, when Neri Oxman, when she's building something, she's still being able to use, like, organic matter. So it depends on the ink. And that is why my proposal said that, like, if you use lignin based ink and 3D printed, because lignin is an agricultural waste. So I think using all that agricultural waste, again, going back to the concept in biomimicry and nature, that there's no waste in nature. So all this, what we call as agricultural waste, if we were able to use that, make an ink, build a system, which again would have the pores and would be able to, because the material would be the same, mimic the tracheids of a tree. I don't think it would be super expensive, but again, that's at this stage, it's a hypothetical answer.
I think what we will do now is to close the questions. We have everybody's questions, and we will share the entire chat with Sunanda, and I think you can take up the questions individually with people specifically if there is, because there are lots and lots coming up, and they are quite interesting. Maybe you should start doing your PhD, Sunanda. But I would like to thank again all of the participants, and also, of course, Sunanda, for this wonderful interaction. It's been a great experience, not only just to hear Sunanda talk about all of these things, and I'll summarize what she has just said, but also because of all the questions that you asked, and so much interest shown in this subject. I just would like to put everything together that Sunanda talked today about how little experience we as human beings have, and what is the vast experience of nature of about 3.8 billion years. She talked about the 9 principles of biomimicry. She compared biology with engineering. And then she talked about her inspiration, and then all the laws, and finally her whole process of the thesis and the research, and how she went about it, and what were her findings and conclusions related to this topic of water transportation in buildings through biomimicry in trees. So it was a wonderful presentation, and I am sure that we are all taking back a lot of information and a lot of inspiration actually from this topic. We will also want to invite all our participants to participate in our future webinars. This will be our next webinar on environmental psychology in the COVID-19 pandemic. Our speaker, a very eminent architect and urban planner, architect Sulakshana Mahajan, who has written several books. She is one of the rare persons in this field of environmental psychology, and she will be talking about it. So I welcome all of you to participate also in this webinar. Hopefully we'll be able to take a lot more participants next week, and do disseminate this information about these knowledge series and research series of Institute of Environmental Architecture and Research. And I thank all of you for joining in. Thank you very much. Thank you.